Hello and welcome to the Historic Egyptian Theater here in beautiful downtown DeKalb, Illinois. My name is Alex Neard. I'm the Executive Director here.
And I'm Janine Holcomb. I'm the Marketing and Communications Director here.
And we are so excited to welcome all of our LHAT friends here to the Egyptian Theater. And we're going to take a little time and show you around our beautiful, humble little theater.
But before we take you inside, we want to show you just some of the places we've popped up around the community that we've been a part of for over 91 years now. So let's go take a jump around town and see where we see the Egyptian Theater. Welcome back inside to the Egyptian Theater. We are standing right inside our foyer. If you turn as we're walking around here to our one and only box office window with our lovely box office manager, Nora. Hi,
Say hi, Nora.
Hello. But let's come on inside. Come see our lobby and let's hear a little bit about the history of the Egyptian Theater.
So here in our main lobby, take a look at this gorgeous floor. Give you a quick history of the theater. We opened December 10th, 1929, in the middle of kind of a crisis in America. The stock market had just crashed in October of 1929. And so there was a number of things that changed very quickly here at the theater. They just were trying to get the project done and try and get the doors open and try and start making money. So there was a number of things that changed. One of them was this beautiful lobby floor that we're standing on here. This is the original floor from 1929. They could, originally, a marble floor was planned here, and they could no longer afford that. And so they went around town and from other projects and abandoned buildings, brought tile that was left over from those other projects, brought it here, broke it up, and put down this mosaic floor. So we always say this is actually way better than had they put in a marble floor because we have pieces of DeKalb's history right here in our own lobby. So the theater opened in 1929 as vaudeville and movie theater. Vaudeville quickly faded away in the 30s, and this turned into strictly a commercial movie theater. That went on for a number of decades into the mid-70s when things got pretty rough, both for the building as well as for the business at the time. The business, unfortunately, in the late 70s was heading towards bankruptcy, and the building was almost in complete disrepair, so much so that the city of DeKalb was really close to condemning it and tearing the building down and turning this into a parking lot. A sad story that has happened so many places across the U.S. So thankfully, a group of concerned local citizens stepped up and formed our nonprofit organization, Preservation of Egyptian Theater. In 1978, formed that nonprofit, took over ownership of the theater, and got it listed on the National Registry of Historic Places and started having events here, even though about 2/3 of the seats had to be caution taped off because of falling plaster. Things were so bad at the time, there was holes in the ceiling with rain and snow coming in, animals running around in here, the basements were flooded, the boiler no longer worked, all the plaster walls were crumbling and falling in. It was in really bad shape. And thankfully, in the early 80s, we got a grant from the state of Illinois for about $2.2 million to do a complete restoration of the theater. That was fantastic. However, at the time, the to-do list was about $3.5 million. So much like in 1929, when they had to cut back, scale back, and stretch dollars, they had to do the same thing again. So the theater was closed for only 9 months during that restoration from 1982 to 1983. And when it reopened in 1983, it was home to a number of community organizations with live events and showing films, primarily classic films, documentaries, foreign films, and that continued through the 80s into the 90s. Going from the late 90s into the early 2000s, kind of the film staple, the business that was here was not working anymore. And things once again got in really bad shape, this time primarily just for the organization and thankfully not for the building. But the organization went through kind of a resurgence and a morphing of sorts.
Yeah.
So today we have a number of community groups. We have over 25 different community organizations that utilize the theater every single year, a number of touring shows. We still show movies on occasion, primarily still documentaries, classic films, other things like that. And the other major point in our timeline here would have been in 2019. So I'll let Janine talk a little bit about our most recent project that we just completed.
So as Alex said, we had a huge moment in Egyptian theater history here in 2019. We just did a major restoration project that was $6.5 million, and we kicked it off on a very special date of May 1st, 2019. Now you may think, why May 1st, 2019? That doesn't seem that special. Well, it happened to be 90 years to the day that they broke ground in 1929 for this theater, which just was so cool. What serendipity that we were able to find this in our newspaper and able to have one of our most momentous moments in our history tie in with the very inception. So come on back. So where we're kind of standing now is all what had been, and as we move into the new carpeted areas where our concession stand is, this is the new part of the Egyptian theater. But what was really interesting, over the 18 months that we had contractors here, from plumbers to electricians, everything was, tearing apart the Egyptian theater. We kind of saw quite the increase in our ghost activity.
Yeah, it was quite active throughout the project.
Yeah, it definitely stirred some things up.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we had quite the timeline here for 18 months that we worked on this project to about 2 years. But Alex, you can talk about how this project has been talked about for a decade, if not more.
So our expansion project that we just completed fall of 2020, as Janine mentions, kicked off May 1st, 2019, long before we thought COVID was going to be a thing. And it was a lobby expansion. So the primary components of this were to expand our restrooms, expand our concessions, expand our rear lobby space, but most importantly, believe it or not, for the first time since 1929, to add air conditioning. This building had never had air conditioning. It was originally supposed to in 1929. It was cut because of the cost, again, because of the crash of the stock market. The renovation in 1983, they had planned to put in air conditioning, and again, it was cut because of the cost. So not until over 90 years later did we finally get air conditioning. So we ran our capital campaign. It was called Expanding Beyond 90 Years. And it's kicked off fantastic. We had no idea what was coming in 2020. Obviously, None of us did. And it was quite the project because we continued having programming as we were doing construction. And so we were building the new building next door to the existing building and starting to make those connections coming in. So some of those things that we improved, restrooms here on the main floor. We used to only have 3 women's stalls, and main floor seats 850 people, 550 people in the balcony, and there was only an additional 2 women's stalls up there. We know we're preaching to the choir. Everybody
no one
has those
bathrooms.
challenges. And so every event, no matter how many people we had here, there were always lines to the women's bathroom. Again, nothing new to historic theaters. But those were definitely the biggest frustration points for people, the lines of the bathrooms. Some of our intermissions were half an hour long just to be able to get people through the restrooms. We only had 1 concession stand here in the building, here on the main floor. It only had 2 points of sale. So for 1,400 people, we only had 2 points of sale. We didn't have our own liquor license. So for big concerts, we had to contract with a local bar that would come in and set up a station in the main lobby to serve liquor. So there was just a lot of things that disrupted the patron experience here. And so not only did we want to add air conditioning so we could be open year-round, but we wanted to address those other headaches and kind of frustration points for our patrons. So many other things here were fantastic, and we really wanted to address kind of those final points that really frustrated people.
Now, like Alex said, we have focused so hard that when a patron leaves their car, from the minute they walk under our marquee, enjoy the show, grab a drink, and leave, they are having a tremendous experience here at the Egyptian Theater, and so many of the issues that this project addressed are absolutely patron-based. And one of our favorite, at least my personal favorite parts of the project we are standing on right now is our glorious carpet. We went back to what would have been here in 1929. We didn't have anything on record showing the exact print or color or pattern, but we were able to work with a wonderful, wonderful company to make this happen. Alex, I mean, you can talk about that. That was your baby.
Huge thank you to Mark Thoman with Stuart Jackson and Bloomsburg Carpet that helped us with this project. It was years in the making to be able to put this carpet in. The previous carpet was
less less than desirable.
Pretty awful, to put it plainly and bluntly. It was put in 1983, had no design to it, was just kind of a monotone color, and showed every stain, showed its age. It was pretty awful. So when we went to replace the carpet, we unfortunately didn't have any photos of what the original carpet looked like. We didn't have any pieces of the original carpet. So we worked with Mark, and he helped us and said, you know, a lot of times in the 20s, architects at the time designed the carpet first, and then took that design and kind of incorporated it into the building design. So since we didn't know what the carpet originally looked like, we could reverse engineer it. We could take the design of the building and take that down into a new carpet design. So when you look at our carpet, there are pieces, every piece that you see in the carpet are elements of the architecture throughout the entire building, and definitely hides things. We have accidentally tripped over things that have been left on this carpet that we didn't realize were there, which means it hides stains really well.
And it's been so fun as we've started to have audiences back here that they've been pointing out, oh my gosh, that's the beetle in your window. That's the scarabs that are here. That is the lotus flower that you find everywhere in the Egyptian. So it's been really fun because it, as Alex said, was a tremendous undertaking to design this carpet with the correct colors, the architectural elements, and to have audiences come in, be absolutely wowed, and then see that this is very much a carpet that could only be in our Egyptian theater because it is completely customized to us. So it was a dream. We love them, highly recommend them. Wish we could see you at LHAT, but virtual hi.
So huge thank you to, again, Mark with Stuart Jackson and Bloomsburg Carpet. Wonderful LHAT members. Can't recommend them enough.
So, since we talked a lot about our expansion project, why don't we jump on up to our stage?
So we're here on our stage now with a beautiful auditorium behind us here, currently with 1,400 seats, 850 on the main floor, 550 in the balcony. We did used to have more seats than that here. When the theater first opened, there were about 1,600 seats. We did replace all the seats in 2012 with all new seats from Irwin Seating, but we were able to match almost identically the original design of the seats from 1929. Now, the Egyptian Theater was once one of over 100 Egyptian theaters built around the country. Many of you may know this, but for those that don't, in 1922, King Tut's tomb was discovered and kicked off Egyptomania, kind of this Egyptian craze all around the U.S. So as these atmospheric theaters were being built around the United States, suddenly lots of architects started choosing the Egyptian theme. This being built in the late 20s, Egyptomania was still going strong. So the architect here chose the Egyptian theme, and even though King Tut was the inspiration for this, they still didn't know a whole lot about King Tut. So this theater is actually based on Pharaoh Ramses II. So when you look around the theater and you see the different pharaoh heads and the different detail here, this is actually based on Pharaoh Ramses II. So once one of over 100 Egyptian theaters built around the country, and it wasn't a change, just lots of different architects choosing the theme. Today, as far as we know, we are one of only 7 Egyptian theaters left in the United States and the only one east of the Rocky Mountains. Now, there are many other theaters that have Egyptian themes, but named Egyptian theaters, there's only a few of us left.
Well, speaking of all the different numbers and figures that obviously go around the Egyptian theater, one figure that you may be surprised by, we think we have about 6 ghosts here in the Egyptian theater, and many of them are actually located right in our auditorium and on our stage as well. We've heard stories from contractors over the past construction. We've had stories from performers. A magician on stage even told me who was up in the balcony when the balcony was closed, and we don't know who he saw. So many different things that we've seen. Anyway, so we think we have about 6 ghosts here in one of the 7 remaining Egyptian theaters.
Yeah. We are one of the top 10 most haunted theaters in Illinois.
That's true.
As we know, most theaters have ghosts, and we make sure we take advantage of that. So real quick stage specs for those that are interested, which hopefully are most of you. Right here behind us is our orchestra pit. This is up most of the time. I wish it was as simple as many of you have, but most of you are like us. You can't just push a button and lower it. Our pit goes down about 6 feet, takes about 8 men, about an hour to completely dismantle it and lower it down. So we don't do that very often, only if we have big musicals in here. So, stage dimensions here from the proscenium opening is 35 feet wide. From the front of the stage to the back of the stage is 40 feet deep. We've got 32 line sets over on stage right with 700 pounds of capacity each arbor. Our 3 electrics are motorized, and those are 1,200 pound capacity, and we did that a couple of years ago, which made a huge difference. Not a very big backstage space, as most of these historic theaters are, so the performance space is a decent size, but what all of us struggle with is that backstage space, and this being an old vaudeville house, we definitely have those constraints. So our backstage and our wing space is very tight, but we make it work, and thankfully we do have a fly system. It's a counterweight fly system here that we use for pretty much all of our stuff. Our movie screen, when it's down, is 35 feet wide and 22 feet tall, and is the largest movie screen in DeKalb County. Not that there's a lot of movie screens in DeKalb County, but we do have the largest. So let's jump from the stage here down to our dressing rooms.
Welcome to our dressing rooms. So down here we have 6 dressing rooms, we have men and women's bathrooms, and we have a shower down here. So from touring artists to dance recitals to everything in between, spring sings with different schools, we get a lot of people down in here. And it's pretty spacious, it's really nice when we have touring shows.
Come on in.
However, as we start having especially dance recitals, we joke that I think they stack kids in corners because it can be a little tight down here. But we're really happy with our dressing rooms. This was one of the first areas in the Egyptian theater that actually had air conditioning, so that was down here. And when Alex talked about in the late 70s where this theater was in not the best of shape, this room particularly was in horrible shape. It was in about 4 feet deep of water, completely destroyed, so we were able to restore that back in the 80s. But within the past 10 years, we had a major donor come in, help us restore the dressing rooms down here to really quite nice quality for a 91-year-old theater. So it's a little tight, it's a little, as you all know, we're preaching to the choir. We've said this a million times on this tour, that there's always these little growing pains, but we've been pretty proud. And as one of our favorite aspects of the dressing room that harkens back to the early days of the Egyptian theater is this door right here. So this is our trunk door. So this was saved in the 70s because in 1929, when we were still a vaudeville house, this is how the trunks would have loaded in. There wouldn't have been a staircase, there would have been a ramp. They could have pushed their trunks with their costumes, props, all different things right down that door.
So all of our dressing rooms here are directly underneath the stage, and we've got the trunk door to the outside. We also have right here in the middle of the dressing rooms a small little hallway. If you take a look up here, this goes directly to the orchestra pit. So when we do have the orchestra pit down, our musicians have a way to get in and out of the pit fairly easily. So, we're done in the dressing rooms here. Why don't we jump on up to the balcony?
Welcome to our balcony. So as Alex mentioned before, we are a 501c3 nonprofit, but Alex, you want to talk a little about who owns this building, who owns our nonprofit, and who works here?
Yeah, so 1978, our nonprofit was formed, still owns and operates the theater to this day. We were a very small staff, only 4 full-time employees here and about 4 part-time employees and about 100 volunteers that help us do all of our events.
If only our ghosts helped around the theater, that would be perfect.
I wish we could leave them to-do lists.
I know.
I've tried.
Alas.
Yes.
So living, we have 4 full-time.
Living, we have 4 full-time, 4 part-time. And we could not do what we do here without our amazing volunteers. Much like everybody else out there watching tonight, our volunteers help us do our events, from ticket takers to ushers, helping concessions, special events, and all sorts of oddities throughout the year to help keep the theater up and running.
Other duties as assigned.
Yes. So before COVID, we were open about 42 weeks out of the year. We averaged about 185 events, bringing in over 42,000 patrons through our doors. But the number we're always most proud of is over 30 different community organizations that utilize the theater every single year. Everything from local dance studios, community theater, Northern Illinois University, the local library, lots of other nonprofits, the city of DeKalb, all sorts of organizations, arts and otherwise, that use the theater for their events. We really try and be a centerpiece for the community and welcome pretty much anything through our doors. And we're doing a lot more touring shows now, so we do present as well. On average, we have about 30 to 35 events that we present every single year, and usually do on average maybe about 2 movies a month. And then lots of other private events, from weddings, baptisms, funerals, birthday parties, graduations, proms, business meetings, you name it, we've had it here on our stage, just like the rest of you out there. So we try and keep the Egyptian Theater as busy as possible, people in these seats, and try and keep the building up as much as we can. And it's a never-ending project.
It is a never-ending project. And as Alex mentioned, we do show a lot of movies, some of them digital and some of them on our 35 carbon arc projectors. So let's head on up to the projection booth. Welcome to our projection booth. So as you can see, we still have our 35mm carbon arc projectors. Now, these are not original to the theater, but they're gosh darn close. These we have placed in the 1930s, being installed here at the Egyptian. And they still work, and we still have someone here that is super passionate about arc flash projectors and knows how to use them quite well. So shout out to Orion, our projectionist, who helps us bring movie magic to the big screen. One of our favorite times that we use these is in December. We like to show It's a Wonderful Life. It's a huge showing here. We make it snow in the audience. It's one of my most magical moments here at the Egyptian Theater, and it's all thanks to these guys. We like to do a fun pre-show beforehand with a cartoon, some old advertisements, and newsreel to make it really feel like you're watching It's a Wonderful Life when it was released here at the Egyptian. But the majority of our movies are shown on this bad boy right here. We have a brand new, in the past 3-4 years, digital projector. So we were able to get this installed, and it was for a very special event. We have an actor that came from DeKalb named Richard Jenkins. My way of describing him is, if you've seen the movie Step Brothers, he's the dad, or if you've seen The Shape of Water, he's won an Emmy. He's a very fantastic actor and a very fantastic human. So we were able to be in touch with Richard. He picked out 9 of his favorite films that he starred in. We showed them here, and on the final film, which was The Shape of Water, Richard was here in person. And let's head on down to the mezzanine with Alex.
We're here in our mezzanine, another small space in our theater here, but we make the most of it. So let's take a quick walk down our mezzanine here. We just came down from the balcony. We have our old restrooms here that we're going to be transforming. The men's restroom only had 1 urinal, 1 stall, so we're going to gut that and we're going to use that for archive storage. There was nothing historical about that.
Nope.
The best example I can give is it looked like a
80s Park District?
Yeah, like middle school gymnasium bathroom from the 80s.
Painting a picture.
Yes. So no longer using those. We have our new restrooms up here in the mezzanine in the new expansion. So let's take a look into our expanded foyer here, one of our new favorite spots that we added into the building. So here in the expanded foyer, we added 2 new points of sale. We had no concession stand up here in the balcony, so it made it very difficult when we had sold out events. So we now have 2 stations up here, exact replicas of downstairs. So we went from 2 to 6 in the building. One of the things that was really important is to make sure that we had the same layout everywhere, so that no matter who was staffing a different station, the muscle memory was the same for everybody. And this expanded foyer isn't just the concession stand, but it also acts as a meeting room, hopefully meet and greets, donor lounge, VIP area, a huge multi-purpose area that we can use for all sorts of different things up here. One of our favorite spaces that was completed as part of the expansion project recently. And that's our expanded foyer, and that's really the Egyptian Theater.
In a nutshell.
You've seen about everything other than up on the roof, but you'll have to come for a special tour of that later.
Yeah, that's not on film.
The theater, like all of you out there, has so much history here. Since 1929, we're constantly learning new things, hearing wonderful stories about people's first kisses in the balcony, first time seeing a movie, your grandparents getting engaged in front of the theater.
Who knew?
All sorts of wonderful stories here. Tons of famous performers. But the most famous people that have probably ever been here, we've had 2 presidents and 1 first lady, and that would be John F. Kennedy, Ronald Reagan, and Eleanor Roosevelt.
And now, one of our special favorite guests, LHAT 2021. So thank you for being here at the Egyptian Theater, even though it was virtual. We're so glad that we could welcome you here across many of our different spaces and our new expansion spaces. So thank you for including us on the Ramble, LHAT. We had a great time, and we hope you had a great time touring the theater.
And if you are ever in DeKalb, our
Yes.
doors are open for you. Please never hesitate to reach out. We would love to show you the theater. We'll maybe take you up on the roof, maybe take you down in the tunnels.
Yeah, say our doors and our bar always open.
Thanks for having us.